So my title of the talk today is Beside and Slantwise, Transing the Map. If we Google a map of trans hangouts, mostly what we're going to get are policy maps. Also, there are, I come up, funny enough, that black map on the second row. There's very few trans hangouts on my map, but that's just to say there aren't really maps of trans hangouts because mostly they could lead to violence. In fact, mostly what you get is policy maps, like LGBT Map, which I really recommend as an organization if you've never checked them out or taught with them, who do really interesting thinking around how to see what kind of policies support or inhibit trans lives and other kinds of inequity in the world. If you were to Google map of trans murders, because actually if you were to Google map of trans people, you would get a lot of maps of trans murders. You would also turn out this recent map by some trans, as they're called, trans-exclusionally radical feminists. I wouldn't call them TERFs. They're just exclusionists. Let's not call them feminists. They're not radical. And they've been using Google Maps to track and target trans healthcare providers. As long, I'm assuming that you've heard about the many anti-trans bills over time. So I want you to know that these are the kind of trans maps that exist. Another kind is, and we're going to get to this, the map in the middle, which is the NYC Historic Maps Project, which out of, I think it's like nearly 400 sites, less than a dozen are about trans people. One of them is the trans community center, like LGBT community center. Most of them are residences or a place a trans person played tennis. So the kind of like history that we have of trans lives and being in geography is so limited for mapping. So I just want to set that up. So I want to say that trans life is besides and slantwise, and I'll talk about that in a second. And it also very much still would like to be seen and recognized. It would like to partake in public space. And there's so much about private space that we can learn from it, but we also want to map these public experiences. But if and M maps are always categorizations of data to make, to access, and there is no such data, what can we do in terms of, it's like thinking about it, it's thinking about it, come on. I moved my, I had to get rid of so much stuff to get, come on. Oh, how can we trans the map? There it is, don't go past the slide. How can we trans the map? And when I'm thinking of, by claiming, creating, and I want to say bringing in social network analysis into GIS. I think one of the reasons we're tired of maps is that we keep looking at maps and we keep innovating same things about the same kind of technology. There are people who cannot be mapped in place in that way, and we have so many skills and statistics and techniques and color theory and innovation and so much software. Social network analysis software sucks, and it could use us. And if we want to do something new, I would like to say this is a way we can go. And that's about transing the map. And when I say transing the map, I want to pull on transness in terms of trans thought and theory and method, which is supposedly relatively new, but in fact has been around for a long time, and transness in general, as well as trans survival. And I think that this is very much bound to anti-colonial thinking, thinking about BIPOC maps. If we think about what's happening right now in Palestine and Israel, who cannot be mapped, who cannot be named, thinking about refugee maps, thinking about Maline's work. And maybe so you can think about trans, not exactly, but think about it as a proxy in your mind for so many different people who can't be mapped in certain ways at certain times, even in the past, for someone to come after them or out them. So what am I drawing on for spatializing trans theory for the love of maps? It goes all the way back to Eve Sedgwick, who's so lovely, who has like a little note, spatiality in her citations. Beyond, beneath, beside. I was like, this is very dear. And page 8 to 9 never shows up again, but she has this amazing definition of being beside, and approaching queer theory as being beside instead of, or alongside, rather than toward or facing, but traveling with. And then, of course, the wondrous Sarah Ahmed, because all things Sarah Ahmed, who writes that queer moments do happen as moments where the world appears slantwise, the cut of vertical line from history, to be cut off from signs of intimacy, sexual, racial, and or gender, etc., to share a part of which has been cut and divided. And so these terms have been like really permeating my thinking for many years now. as has the work of Hill Malatino, which if you haven't read it, please read it. It's beautiful. It's only 62 pages. It's free online. And Hill Malatino, we'll talk about in a second, draws deeply on the work of Leah Lakshmi Peepsna, Sarah Samar Sinha, who I've practiced their name so many times, who wrote care work about disability justice and kinds of care webs, and also Cameron Awkward Rich's The Terrible We, which is an incredible book which critiques what the heck is a we, right? And one of the stories that Cam starts off with is talking about a white mom of a trans person saying, oh my gosh, this is great, we've gone from gender identity disorder, where it's a psychological disorder, to gender dysphoria in 2013. It's about anxiety and stress that the cishet world puts upon trans people. And Cam says, yeah, there's all these black women in prison who can't get their meds anymore. Trans women in prison, right? And so actually when we think about who is the we and who are we fighting for, how are we doing that? And I have this long quote from Malatino, which is the only long quote, promise. But I want to bring in this idea of care webs, because I think that came apparent to you if they weren't before, especially during the pandemic, when you think about mutual aid and other ways of relating to people, when we're stuck very much in our houses, and our sociality became very much shifted and is still radically altered in our digital lives, but in our real lives as well. But a resilient care web coheres through consistently foregrounding the realities of burnout, and the gendered, race, and class dynamics that result in the differential distribution of care, those receiving as well as giving it. It challenges us all, it's a gauntlet thrown down, Malatino says, to be deliberate, to communicate capacity, to unlearn the shame that has become attached to asking for, to not being mapped, right? There's a shame to that. So many people feel ashamed, so much desiring that. To become attached to asking for, offering, accepting help, that we've been full body soaked and steeped in the mythos of neoliberal entrepreneurial self-making. It prompts us to sit communally with the question of how best to care for each other, with our differing abilities, idiosyncrasies, traumas, with our hard-to-love thorns intact. And I would like to say that it prompts us to sit communally and map exactly in the way that Jack was talking. These ideas of the impractical workshop, I'm like, yes, so good, right? And to sit and say, actually, what is your life like? To be honest, especially as people who have 9-to-5s and people who are professoring and never stop working. And how does that work? And how are we doing? And how are we feeling? And that comes from Malatino's trans care. The other quote that is lovely and short to start us off is Cameron Awkward Rich, who says that transness, at minimum, is the assistance on human capacity for once unimaginable change. So how can we change maps? How can they be different? How can transness inspire new thinking about mapping, and how can we trans the map? So I have been doing this work on Trans Tumblr. I actually wrote about how I haven't been able to write about it. Finally figured out how to write about it, and writing about how I couldn't write about it for a decade. That happens. And I've been gathering millions of posts on the old Tumblr, which if you don't know, the old photo blogging website. And it's still out there. Yay, Tumblr. Yay, it's a wonderful thing. I was looking for my new name, and I found so many young people who are still there. They're very much still there. It's primarily used by youth based on what we see in the pictures. Gosh knows who's in there. There is no one who is my age or younger who is trans who has not touched Trans Tumblr. Right? I'm in my mid-40s. And so it has impacted your life even to see all these people. The reason it really took a downturn is because with the NSFW, not safe for work laws, all of the images of surgery scars and recommendations, like is it a male nipple or a female nipple, when you have a person who is non-binary or transitioning, all of these images just went away. And all of this data and medical knowledge, and some of it is coming back right now, but ongoing. There were a lot of suicide notes and community support notes. People would swoop in saying, I am here. There was a finding and sharing of medical knowledge, a production of culture. What is it to be trans? Because you also have a bunch of teenagers saying, you're not trans enough. No, you're not, because they're teenagers, and that they're gonna do that no matter what it's about. And there's also harm in that. But the geographies of it is, so many people said, oh my God, how are you gonna map this data? And that's what I wanna get to. And also the kind of data visualizations and software that you can do is there's a lot of people who have pulled images from Tumblr or dating sites for people who identify as trans, and that's how we get the male-female recognition package, that's what it's called, that is like running on Facebook every time you use it, it's running on Instagram, it is how your target and data is targeted towards on Google at any time, and that has been based on trans lives and images. So because of the GIS, I've been collecting all these scripts, over 4 years. It's not been 4 years, it's been 10 years. I edited it back. It's 500 posts a day. There's 17 million, that's 1.5. There's 17 million unique posts. Yes, I wrote that paper. Okay, I just want to show you what the data, oh no. I just want to show you what the data looked like. I didn't realize it was under there. The data looks like that, right? And it doesn't have latitude and longitude, that's what I'm telling you. But back in the day, if we look at these kind of images, you have a bunch of teenagers who have done what? They have taken a picture in their parents' bathroom. And so if you did grab the latitude and longitude out back in the day, you also had, you could map everybody's parents' bathroom to their parents' bathroom. And or their closet, right? These kids are not out, they're not sharing their gender identity with other people, they're in a park, they're nearby a school, and they could be very much tracked in how scary that was. So the inability to grab that out of those images is actually a wonderful thing I did not in time. What I wound up doing instead is making social network analyses. And if you think these are hard to read, and look how smart we are in this room, it needs help. Can we help these people? So these are social network analyses. Each of these dots is a person. Each line between them, these very tiny lines are someone liking another person's post. So on the left, you have like 17,000 or 13,000 posts, like about a year apart. That's you usually got 15,000 per month, and usually about 25 to 30,000 likes per month in this group of people. And you get around 5 degrees of separation. So you actually have, if we zoomed in really, really far, if you look around the edges, you can see these little fragments of dots all by themselves. But mostly people are connected in this big gooey hub in the middle. And that's really cool because those little dots on the edge are telling us that most people are in conversation, right? In fact, if we counted the dots, it's like 1,000 people who are not in the middle of this conversation, and a lot of them are people who accidentally use the hashtag FTM for first time mom, right? So they're like, oops, where am I? Oops, wrong thread. Maybe some of them were excited, but like, look at you, cute kids. When we think about like what's happening in these conversations, most people are talking to one another, they're connected to one another, even through the admiring of each other. And there's a lot of people looking and afraid of liking, afraid of this showing up on their computer history. But these kinds of images are really powerful. If we zoom in, we start to see, so these are each person, again, a dot. The bigger the dot is the more likes or of someone else or being liked. And you can see these kind of hubs start to form. When I showed this to a pack of 10 undergrads at the time, they were livid. Oh, this person's awful. They have white dreads, and they're they're cultural appropriation, and they're so mean, and I hate them. Oh, that person's so nice. I love them. They reposted me. Oh, that's cool. You know, and they could recognize this as a map of their lives. This is a world that has touched, like, those people are in their early 30s now, and if I still show it to people, they remember these names. They spent so long in this world that this is a map of their lives that we don't see and we don't have another way of articulating really well. The other thing about social network analysis is the relationship between the topics that they're talking about. Something like top surgery, which is orange, and a binder, which you wear usually maybe before, or you don't even have to have top surgery to have a double mastectomy and then have pecs rebuilt through plastic surgery. A binder is something like an ace bandage wrapped around you to flatten your chest. You see kind of a breakdown that people actually aren't talking about these two topics together, and we start to realize how they're telling stories and how they're making narrative, that they live in a binder world or they live in a top surgery world, and maybe it's one or the other. And the binder itself, The binder is the object they're talking about rather than binding, because I think anyone in this room could figure out how to wrap an ace bandage around themselves, but where to get the object? What is the object that works? Is it safe? Like, how does the binder work and the technology of it? So how do we map these kinds of things that are objects that are incredibly important to trans and marginalized lives that also become part of the maps that we need to make and see? But again, we're back at Cameron saying transness at minimum is the insistence on the human capacity for radical change. How can we trans the map? Which brings me to Nick Lawley, who's just fabulous, who says that I suggest we hold a place for doubt and unknowing, acknowledging the potentials and possibilities of GIS do not pre-exist practice, but rather critical GIS emerges in the doing and practices of GIS. And this is so much of what Jack just told us, right? Like, what is the actual queer practice? How do we queer things, and how do we hold them, what we're doing, so we don't become a classic approach? I love us being classic, but not. So when your story is narrowly told or imagined, would you ever turn to maps for truth? No, you turn to another way of mapping. I'm not exactly sure if I think that social network analysis should then be laid upon GIS, but I do think they are an incredibly powerful tool that we can teach people how to read, that we could analyze and work with and take to new capacities. Sociology is not doing anything with them. That's great. They have so many departments and power. Let's take it. They're not paying attention. Let's take it. Let's take the skill and the power. We need to revelize how they are understood and used. And we need to use the skills and the power and the insight we have to map worlds that are beside and slantwise, right? To get out of our thinking. And by doing this, I'm sure we're going to have a ton of different ways to think about GIS. And I think there are other kinds of data visualization tools too. I don't want to diss on text analysis. I love it. Bring in the infographics, whatever. I think we are so skilled and talented in those things, but especially this. I mean, however would you map worlds like this? This is Edie Fake, who's a very famous trans artist who has these kind of fantasy worlds. Fantasy plays so central in trans thinking in life. How you reimagine bodies, how you reimagine spaces are so tied together. How would these come into the ways that we are making space? So that's it. Thank you.